All right, so we're here with Basir, and he's going to show us ScopeRoot. Um, the reason for this demo is we need a tool for our configuration and variables during release cycles. We have multiple environments, and we don't want to go through a release cycle for a simple feature flag change, or variable change, such as like a text or something. So Basir has a solution for us, and he's going to demo it today.
Yeah, so I've been working on a tool called ScopeRoot. It's a tool that uh, it comes from a problem that I had over many years ago, and it's basically just configurations for white label applications, and it's a problem that came up over and over again. And so I decided to come up with a solution once and for all. So with ScopeRoot, we have our initial login here, and one of the first things you want to do is you want to either sign in with Google or create a new account with email and password. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up a new account.
Nice, and this is using auth0.
Yeah, so it's using Auth0, and so the idea is that there's many different kinds of logins that you could use. So for example, if you log in with your company email address, right, then all of your employees will be able to have a shared playground. And so, that's very useful within a company environment, but also you can also just set it up on your own personal account. And so you have your own personal account just for you. So yeah, so I just set up a new account just for me. And now when you first initialize ScopeRoot, right? Like I said, it creates a new playground just for you, and it does give you like a getting started information on things that you need to set up, right? And so now one of the things that you want to do with ScopeRoot is you want to initialize a few variables that will represent your configuration space, right? So Amit, for example, at your company, right? What are some variables that change across configuration to configuration?
Um, sure, we can say something like database host name.
Yeah. Okay. Um, all right, but so we have a database hostname, right? So now with the database hostname, does that change across staging, production? Do you have multiple clients, so on and so forth? So
Hmm.
do you have multiple environments?
Yeah, good question. So we do have multiple clients and multiple environments.
Okay.
So we have a test environment, we have staging,
Okay.
and we have production.
Okay. All right. So first thing you want to do is you want to create a new scope variable, and let's call it environment. And so, like you said, test, right?
Hmm.
There's a test environment, and then production, and then you also said you have multiple clients.
That's right. So,
Do you call them clients?
yeah, sure. Oh, actually, let's call them states because,
States?
yeah,
Okay.
essentially the clients are distributed amongst the all of the states in the United States. So,
Okay. All right. So just give me some state off the top of your head.
sure, let's go with New York,
New York.
Colorado, Wyoming.
Okay. Are there anything else that changes across configuration to configuration?
Mm, yeah, I mean, I think that's good for now. Uh, do you mean like a variable that
Yeah.
changes? Okay, yeah. So, like I said, let's go with the DB hostname.
Okay. DB hostname. Okay. DB host. Actually, you know what? We can configure DB host names later on
Hmm.
within the configurations themselves.
Sure.
Okay. And so we just set up all our scope variables and our scope options.
Hmm.
and you can actually reposition them at a later date if you want. So like, let's say you want to put Colorado as number 1, you can go ahead and do that.
Nice.
So on and so forth. Let's go back to. Now, the first thing you want to do, once you're done setting up your variables, you want to go to the flags and values sections, right? Because that's ultimately what it's all about, right? You want to set up your configurations here. And so, as you can see, you got your variable set up. And so what's one thing you want to set up right away? So I think you mentioned DB host, right?
Right.
And does the DB host, is that pertinent to every single environment?
Yes.
Okay, so we select all environments, and it's effective for all states, right?
Right.
Okay, so we do that. Oh, yeah. And then we'll just select a version 1, and then we'll create that scope. So just created that scope, and you can go to it. And so now what you want to do is you want to create your DB host flag, right? Now I could call it DB host, right? But I'm assuming that you have other things that are relevant to the database than just the host, right?
Right.
Right. So what we could do is we can actually create an object in ScopeRoot. We can call it database, right? And then call it object. And then inside of there, we can create a sub property called host.
Oh,
right?
Nice.
Yeah. And then we save that. And so we have our object. And what do you want to initialize this value for host?
Oh, so we could just put like just a host name, right? So
yeah, host name.
So it would be a string. Yeah.
Okay. You might have noticed like there's a bunch of different values you can have, your regular true and false number, and so on and so forth. We especially have the null and no value, and so you'll see this play a role later on. But the whole idea is that when you assign a value of null, of course it's going to be null. But in this particular case, if you set it to no value, it's also going to be null in our case. But you'll see later on, no value plays a role when you have inherited configurations where no value allows the inherited values to pass through. Yeah.
Makes sense. Interesting.
Yeah. You see how later on. Yeah, so we have our host name here. And so now keep in mind that this host name is relevant, it applies to all environments on all states, right? Now, Ahmed, is this a variable that changes across all environments in all states?
It does, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So let's say we want to configure a specific state or a specific environment. Like, where do you want to go?
Let's go to production, because production definitely has a different name.
Okay, cool. Let's go to production, and we create version 1 in production. And so we just created it, and we go there now. And so now within production, right, you do want to inherit the database host flag that you just created, right? And so what you want to do is you want to go to the set inheritances. You want to set inheritances. And over here, you can select the version 1 that you created, and you click on modify inheritances of V1, right? And you just give it a second here. And so now you see that it recognizes a scope that is possible for this new scope to inherit from, right? Like it makes sense that production can inherit from all environments, right? And so you select version 1 to inherit from it, and you click on save all inheritances. Now you can go back to your production scope, and you see that production has now inherited the database host flag.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, and there's some extra detail here that you might have noticed as well. Like when you hover over this, it lets you know that which scope it actually inherits from. So it tells you that. And this black indicator, if you're wondering, represents inheritance. So anything before that black bar represents an inherited flag, and then everything after it is non-inherited. So you can see everything here is actually inherited, right? So now you said that we're going to have a specific version for hostname in production, right?
Right.
Okay, so now as you can see right now, there's no value for this specific production snapshot, right?
Mhm.
But you want to override it. So what's the production value?
Sure, we'll just call it prod host name.
Odd host name. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so now you just overrid it, and you can see the raw JSON here. So it's prod host name.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's some extra details here as well. You got it tells you how many child flags you have, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. And so,
Nice. So
yeah,
for prod, let's add something to this object actually if we can.
okay,
Let's add a maximum pool size. So we'll just call it like pool size.
okay. So maximum pool size for the database, right?
Right.
Okay. So max pool size.
Yeah. And we'll set it as an integer of like 20.
Okay. So 20. Okay. Yeah, so we did that. Now, now keep in mind though, would you want this max pool size to apply to all states? Like, is this a flag that applies to all states?
Ooh, that's a good point. It would apply to all states.
Okay, so let's just delete this here, and then let's go back to our all scope, right?
Hmm.
And actually, let me show you an easier way to go there. So you click on C1 inheritance, and this will list all the inheritances for you.
Hmm.
And so you can just go there, and you can add another flag called max pool size.
Hmm.
You want a default value for the max pool size that applies to all states and on all environments?
Yeah, let's say 5.
5, okay. Okay, so now we go back to production, and we want to override it to 20, right?
Right.
Yeah, so we created a general scope and a more specific scope for production.
Ooh, very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
So on the right hand side, is that what is produced here?
Yeah, so this is a raw JSON, and it's actually navigatable as well. And you can copy the raw JSON, like the entire raw JSON, and you can see it gives you everything.
Ah, perfect, perfect. And then I would just paste this into my configuration file.
Yeah. Yeah, you can just copy and paste this into the configuration file if that's how you want to do it. But there are other ways to do it. So like, for example, let's say you want to make a deployment, right? So let's say you want to let's say you want to manage your deployments through this interface here so that you know, let's say you want to let's say you want your application to point to a completely different scope
Hmm.
snapshot, right? Then you can simply change it right here as opposed to copying and pasting the configuration.
Hmm.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, so what's a deployment key that you want to use? Like a unique identifier that you're going to use in your application.
Um, a unique identifier.
Yeah.
Something like
So something like,
WY dash. I guess this would be for like Wyoming dash
okay,
PRD. This is gonna be
PRD.
like Wyoming prod, and then we'll just say -1 or something. It's fine.
Okay. All right. So this would be for Wyoming, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's actually go ahead and create the Wyoming scope snapshot first.
Hmm.
And so this would be for production, Wyoming. Let's set up the inheritances. And so you want to modify the inheritances again. And so you do want to inherit from production, right?
Hmm.
And you see that when you inherited it from production, it also indirectly inherits from the all snapshot as well. And you can see that here, right? So this is indirectly inherited and this is directly inherited.
Hmm.
Yeah, so if you save that, you go back to it. So now we just inherited everything from the previous two scopes that we created, right?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. And so, you can override things. It gives you all the values that were inherited. What's the new value for max pool size? Do you have any?
We'll set it to like 15.
Okay, 15. Do we have a change here?
No, let's keep that the same. It's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, so now let's deploy this, right? So go type in UI prod. What is it? 1?
Sure.
We select production Wyoming and we deploy it. And so now to use the configuration in your application, you use this deployment key, and there's a GraphQL backend, and in this GraphQL backend, you can simply get the JSON configuration using this deployment key.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
how would you access that? Is that through Postman or?
So it's through let me show you actually. Okay. You can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. So what you would do actually is you'd go to deployments and you type in where key equals the deployment key that we inserted. So WIPR1. And then let's say you'd want the scope snapshot JSON configuration, right? Scope snapshot, where is it? Oh, you want the JSON configuration.
Right.
And so this is what you would pass. This is the query that you'd make from your application, and you specify your key, and it gives you your JSON configuration, which is right here.
Oh, very neat. Very neat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the alternative to you saw the raw JSON. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so this becomes very useful, especially when you have like multiple versions. Like, let's say you want to deploy version 2, version 3, and so on and so forth, right? Instead of going into the application and saying, okay, copying and pasting every single time, you could just manage everything right here, right, in the deployments.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay.
And it does like leave you the ability to atomically deploy things. So for example, like let's say we had a version 2, right? This is version 1 right now, but you could create a new deployment key like WIPRD2, and so you can have your code base and your configuration, which points to WIPRD2, go in at the same time. So
got it. That's very interesting. Okay. So this is very useful in the case of, say, I just finished my release cycle and it turns out one of the variables needs to be altered, right?
Okay.
So you're saying I would just alter one of these scope variables and then basically.
Oh, you mean the flags, right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, the flags. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I would just alter one of them.
Yeah, so you just alter one of these.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's great. Okay, and anyone can do this, not just a developer, because it's so visually, it's right there for you, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of the whole point of this, because the idea is that, like, let's say you got some text change that you want to do, and like constant text changes, like they could just come in here and do it themselves, right? So you don't have to build a UI for them; it's already there for you. And not only that, but like the UI doesn't restrict the developer from specialized data formats. Like clearly it's like nested and everything, right? So they don't have to restrict their data format in a way that's configurable by a non-technical person, right? They can just do whatever they want, and it's configurable by a non-technical person.
Ah, okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Like, I'll give you an example, actually. This is one of the websites that I worked on back in the day. It's changed quite a bit, but I remember, this is not the exact example, but this is equivalent, right? So like this text, let's say it would constantly change, or like there was a lot of back and forth, right? And so, the process was, okay, make a ticket, tell a developer to change this HTML, and then, if there's more changes, repeat the process, right? But now, if this was configurable to begin with, then they could just change it right away, right? So saves a lot of time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. That's very interesting. And in my situation, I have, obviously I have all of the states in the United States. So we have 50 states plus some Canadian provinces. So
Right.
you can see how many configuration changes we need to possibly make every single time a single variable might be changed or added or
Yeah.
what have you. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So you're gonna have like 50 states, and like I said, from the inheritances, right? So you have your deep inheritance, as you've seen, right? And so the idea here is that as complex as it gets with multiple states and multiple environments, or even more scope variables with more options, the inheritances works in a way. Let me show you what I mean. Like, okay, yeah. So the idea is that there's all kinds of combinations that you could have, and it'll get handled properly. The general rule that you need to follow is that um, the scope that is lower needs to target less options. Like, production is obviously less than all, right? And so it needs to target less options than its parent, basically. So as long as you follow that rule, then you can have like crazy inheritances and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So, what would you say in your own words is the value add of your system here?
So like I said before, you don't have to make a new deployment for like little configuration changes, right? So instead of like just for like a simple HTML change, you don't like a non-technical person can just do that right away. So that's one way to think of it. Yeah, and so the other thing is that you don't have to like repeat yourself for configurations. So for example, like when you have a lot of configurations, right? A lot of times you're repeating yourself. So for example, you got your database flag, database.host, so on and so forth, right? So
very true. So I mean, so in my particular example, I've recently had to go into 50 configuration files just because I needed to change a couple of flags.
Yeah.
So that basically took multiple hours, whereas over here you can do it in a couple minutes or something.
Yeah. Like what was what did you need to change across these configuration files?
I had to alter the database host name actually.
Oh wow. Okay.
That's why I brought up the prod host name and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea is that you could just change it at one time, and if you set up your inheritances properly, then you're good to go, right?
Right. And I also needed to. So this was an interesting thing. I also needed to add a new state, right? Because we're not deployed in all 50 of them yet, so we have to add them one at a time. So I had to create a whole new file and copy everything else that had previously existed and alter it.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, so the other thing is that when you make big changes, right? Like you can think of these as like really big levers, right? Like imagine if you have 50 states and multiple environments and so on, right? These when you change this, right, it percolates down into a lot of applications. Like think of it like 100 or 1,000 applications, right? And so when you're affecting so many applications, there's there's risk involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that risk, you want to be able to make big changes in one location so you're not repeating yourself. So, you're not going to make mistakes because you don't have to repeat yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you want to be able to phase in your deployments one by one to reduce the amount of risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one way we could actually do that is you might have noticed there's a snapshot option here, right? And so the idea is that you could have version 1, version 2, so on and so forth, right? But the idea is that if you go back to the inheritance section, right, we see that version 1 of Wyoming production, right, it inherits from version 1 of production, right? So the idea is that you can create a version 2 of this and change your database host, for example, right? And then each of your descendants, child snapshots, basically, they can slowly, one by one, update them to the new database host.
Mm-hmm.
So, so in a sense, you get the best of both worlds, where you're only making that change once, but you're also mitigating risk by doing it one by one.
Mm-hmm. Yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
And just to
So,
add on to your points about this very thing about being repeatable,
yeah,
you mentioned it at the very beginning, the white labeling of products happens
yeah,
all of the time. I use this states example
yeah,
for something like that, but you can have multiple customers, obviously, and you might have like a base foundation as an
right,
application, and then obviously
right,
some customers might want to change their logo, so their image. They might want to change the text. Obviously, you might have to, you're gonna have to change the company title.
right, yeah,
So it's great that you can inherit and then you can modify for each of these products or
yeah,
or customers, right?
yeah. That's true. Yeah, I think inheritance is pretty important when things get used over and over again. And also, like, the benefit here is that you don't you can have customizable objects, right? So it's not like you're forcing everything into a flat structure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let me show you an example of, like, creating a version 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you want to create version 2 of this, right? So actually, well, let's say you want to create version 2 of the all snapshot. Okay, so let's say you want to replicate this. So enter in version 2. Now you got a couple different options if you want to create a version 2, right? You can create a blank version, or you can replicate everything as it is right now into version 2. And so we click on that. Okay, so I just replicated to version 2, and you see everything stays the same, right? And it does give you, like, more information as well. So, like, you have your version 1, version 2 flags, version 1, version 2 values. So now let's say you want to change, what do you want to change in version 2 that applies to everybody?
That applies to everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you can change the max pool size. That's fine. Yeah, that applies to everyone.
okay. What's the new value?
Let's say 10.
10. So you do want to, let's say you want to apply this to Wyoming, right?
Sure.
Okay, so we did override it, right?
We
So
did, yeah, that for this one.
yeah, so let's say, yeah, we overrated it here too. But you get my point though, right? So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, so initially you're inheriting from version 1, but you can inherit from version 2. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It does tell you that there's some problems. I think we I think we forgot to update some flags. Let me see.
Also, this is very useful. It tells you when you've made changes that maybe you weren't expecting, eh?
Yeah, when you make changes that aren't compatible, right? Like if you change the parent, but your child isn't compatible with the parent,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it tells you that.
Ah, okay, good. So this is
Yeah.
it's foolproof type of thing.
Yeah, like there's no way you're gonna break the database when you make these changes. So the idea is that like all of these inheritances, they're not actually dynamic. They're very static in the database. So like you actually have foreign key relations for each of your flags and values and so on. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll have to look into it later. But yeah. So that's how it works initially. There's some extra information here. So for example, you can see the child. You can also import your JSON, right? So like, let's say you want max pool size. So you want to update it to a value of 21, right? So it updated that for you, and it does. So it's not going to duplicate the flag. It's going to reuse it if it finds it, right?
Ah, perfect. Okay.
Yeah. And obviously, like a new flag. True.
I see you've thought about all of the cases, like whether to overwrite, whether to
Yeah,
not
there's a
overwrite.
lot. Yeah, there's a lot of cases. So and the cases go deeper into like, should we override if there's no inherited value or a current value, so on and so forth. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good. So that way you won't make the mistake of overwriting values you weren't expecting to overwrite. You know.
Yeah, exactly. There's also like one more feature I wanted to show you. Let me see here. So you know how when you create a version 2, right? Sometimes you have problems keeping version 2 in sync with the version 1, right? So let's say, for example, let's say you create a new flag in version 1. Let's just say new feature flag, right? And you created it in version 1 because that's your main branch. Of version 2 is where you put all your new stuff, right? And so let's say you want to update version 2 with whatever's in version 1, right? So what you can do is you can click on version 2 and you can click on cherry pick flags and values into version 2. And so you click on that and you can copy this feature flag and this value. And so you can do that and go version 2. And so you can see it's been copied into version 2 and it's actually linked properly.
Oh, very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and you can even like change the flag name. And so now keep in mind that like, even though there's different names here, right? This is a version 2 flag. It doesn't matter because ScopeRoot's not actually using this as a identifier. It's actually using it created its own identifier, right? Its own ID. And so you could do all kind of renaming that you want, right? So you can even say, let's say you want to change everything from underscore to camel case in version 2, right? You can do things like that, and everything will still work.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so then say I wanted to subscribe or purchase. How would I access this? Is this on the cloud or?
Yeah, so right now you just go to ScopeRoot.com and you can just log in with your personal email to check it out. So yeah.
Oh, very nice. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's a history feature as well. This was recently built. Right now, this just displays everything that was inserted, updated, or deleted in the database. Yeah. And it does group everything by transaction. So for example, see this and this is part of the same transaction. And yeah, there's deployments. And obviously you can make changes to the deployment. And so it does give you like nice indicators for that. And And there's scope variables.
That's great.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, very useful.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. I don't think I have any other questions. Do you have anything else you want to showcase?
I guess I'll just go over like the database side of things. Like I said before, right? So everything in the database was done properly in the sense that like it's impossible for you to screw up the data in any way. Like there's foreign key references and constraints all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, just understand like your data is going to be there's always going to be data integrity. So yeah, and it is stored on the Hasura Cloud, so you do get a lot of scalability from that as well.
That's great.
Yeah, and let me see if there's anything. Oh yeah, so there's one more thing. So you know, initially like we defined our scopes with these options, right? Production, all production, Wyoming. So if you want to at a later date, you can change it if you want, right? So let's say you want to change it from Wyoming to Colorado, you could do that, right? Um,
Oh, okay. Nice.
yeah. Now, sometimes you can't do that. So for example, so let's say you want to, so in this case, you can't do that because what you're doing here is you're making your scope too big that it makes it bigger than one of your parents, which is not allowed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it does explain that to you, and it does let you know which scope you're making it bigger than. So it tells you how to
Oh,
fix
interesting. Okay.
it. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah. Um, and eventually we're gonna have users and roles. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
That's great. Thanks so much for showing this to us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming on.